Hi, welcome everybody once again. HTM4305 Back of the House Workshop. This is session number three out of three of the Safety Sanitation Workshop. Okay, so the first couple of sessions we discussed the kitchen safety, and then we started talking about the food safety, and we finished at how food becomes unsafe, right? Five major reasons why food will become unsafe. Okay, so for this session, we're going to talk about so how do we reduce the risk of foodborne illness based on those five major issues. Okay? So you can reduce the risk of foodborne illness by buying from reputable suppliers. So that directly is related to one of the reason, right? So if you buy from a place that's reputable and you know that they source from a trusted supplier, then that should actually help you to minimize the risk. Okay? And to make sure that all of your employees are keeping good personal hygiene, so make sure that you're keeping a good training program also for your kitchen staff as well as your servers, and prevent cross contamination. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but one of the reasons why the food could become unsafe is that using equipments or cutting board knives that's already contaminated, right? So we need to prevent that from happening. Okay? Number four is proper cleaning and sanitizing. Okay? So no matter how well you cook the food, if you do not have a good cleaning and sanitizing procedure in place, that could raise the risk of foodborne illness. Okay? And then the last one is the time and temperature control. So as we discussed in the last video, that the bacteria needs the temperature and the time to grow. Okay, so if you can control them, that could also help with the overall risk of foodborne illness. Okay, so for good personal hygiene, you want to make sure that your employees follow a good procedure throughout. So your employees can make the food unsafe by doing a lot of different things. So by scratching the scalp or the head, even touching the hair or touching any parts of the body or the face. Okay, so make sure to have your employees understand that when they are handling food, they need to be aware, okay, of these issues. And hand washing. So there is actually a proper hand washing procedure. So make sure to wet your hands and your arms in warm water, okay, about 38 degrees Celsius or higher. Okay, and then you apply the soap and scrub your hands, rinse with water, and then dry it up. Now, when you're drying your hand, make sure to use a single-use paper towel, okay, or hand dryer. Do not use a kitchen towel because you never know if somebody used that kitchen towel to clean up a chicken juice, right? And especially for the ladies, okay, for having nails or the fake nails that could become a physical hazard, okay, or even the polish could be considered as chemical hazard. So you want to make sure that when you're in the kitchen, everything is up to standard. Okay, so most kitchen, well, if not all, kitchen in the restaurant will have a uniform standard or the grooming standard. Okay, same thing as the bistro. So make sure that you're wearing the right uniform, clean clothes, and you have your hair tied, and no loose jewelry. Okay, and the minimum cosmetics or the makeup. All right, so cross contamination. So cross contamination is when you have the microorganisms or the pathogens that's transferred from one surface to another, okay, and then eventually to food. So it can happen in many different ways. So you want to control the risk of cross contamination between food, people, equipment, the surface, or even the equipment. Okay? And in order for you to do so, okay, you can prevent the cross contamination by making sure you are cleaning and sanitizing after each task. So after you cut the chicken, you clean and sanitize, and then you can work on something else. Okay? Or separate products in storage and in production, so even inside the refrigerator, if possible. Or while you are preparing certain items, you do not want to have a chicken next to a lettuce, which is next to a cake. Okay? And if you can, separate the use of equipment and preparation areas, and then separate preparation times. So that one would be that, okay, so if you know that you have to cut a case of chicken breast, okay, make sure to do that all at one time, and then you do something else later. Okay, so you do not want to have, once again, cutting chicken at the same time right next to a preparing a lettuce. Okay, another way is to buy prepared ingredients. So in some instances, it may be better to go ahead and buy chicken breast already pre-cut instead of a whole chicken where you have to actually cut the chicken. Okay? So if you can buy the chicken breast, then you actually minimize the one step of preparing the chicken breast. Okay? And make sure to wrap the food items and only use the food grade containers to store food. Meaning that if you are using some container, old container, reuse it for some other purpose, you may cross contaminate the food. Okay? And also wash the produce, which is like vegetables and fruits, before cutting, cooking, or mixing with any other ingredients, because the vegetable and fruits they come from outside. So when you cut it, the bacteria and soil may actually go inside and get mixed in. So you want to make sure that you wash the produce before cutting. Okay? So if you have staff that's being restricted or excluded from the operation because of an illness, and for some reason that person touched the food, you have to make sure that the food is thrown out right away, okay? Not to use it. And also, if you see somebody sneezing onto the food, you want to make sure, even if it's a whole pan of prepared food, just throw it away. Okay? It's always safe. Better to be safe than sorry. So you want to make sure you have a good policy and make sure to tell all your employees to follow the process. Okay, another way that you can prevent the cross contamination is by separating inside the storage area, or in this case, refrigerator. Okay? So you want to arrange and organize in a way that things do not mix and contaminate each other. So from top to bottom, okay, so the top is ready to eat or some vegetable items that doesn't need cooking. And then below it should be seafood. And then in the middle should be whole cuts of beef or pork. And then it goes into ground meat or ground fish. And the last on the bottom should be a whole or ground poultry. Okay, so that would be chicken, turkey, things like that. Okay. For cleaning and sanitizing, there is also a process for that. Okay. So working in a restaurant, that would be the second most thing that you would do other than cooking and preparing. Okay. So every time you use your cooking surface or food contact surface, you need to wash it. Okay. And especially after you work with different types of food, you definitely need to clean and sanitize. And also, if you're working on a cutting board for some time and then you have to step away, go to the bathroom, well, in that case, if you're not sure, you need to always clean it, clear it, and then start fresh. You never know when somebody walked by and then sneezed on the cutting board, right? And also, even if you're doing a same task, okay, same food products, after 4 hours, okay, if it's, let's say, the cutting board, it's been used for 4 hours straight, you need to clean it, sanitize it, get a fresh one. All right. For cleaning and sanitizing, just like hand washing, these are the steps. Okay. So first, you want to get all the big stuff off the surface. Okay. So scrape or remove the food bits from the surface, and then you need to wash the surface with mild soap and rinse the surface with just water. And four is sanitize the surface using a sanitizer. We're going to talk a little bit about sanitizing a little bit later on. And then after that, you allow the surface to air dry. Okay. The one of the most frequent mistake that I see is that after you use the sanitizer, they'll go back and use a towel to wipe it off. Okay. The issue with that is that you're not giving enough time for the sanitizer to actually do its job. So you have to leave it on the surface to air dry. All right, so sanitizing, there are actually two different ways that you can sanitize the surface for equipments. One is heat sanitizing. Okay, the water has to be very hot to reduce the number of pathogens on the surface. Okay, so the water has to be 77 degrees or higher. And you have to immerse whatever the item or the equipment under the hot water for at least 30 seconds. And another one is the chemical sanitizing. So as opposed to the heat sanitizing, the chemical sanitizing uses things like chlorine, iodine, or quartz sanitizer to do the job. Now, in that case, the water actually should not be that hot. In the bistro as well as many of the restaurants, we use chemical sanitizing. Okay? So, as I mentioned before in the previous slide, that when you're using chemical sanitizer, the water should not be too hot. Okay? The reason for that is depending on the type of sanitizer you use, there is a certain things that would affect how well the sanitizing solution would work. Okay? So one is concentration. What that means is that you want to mix the sanitizing solution with just enough water, okay, to make it work. If it is too strong, it's actually hazardous to the health. It becomes a chemical contaminant. But if it's too weak, then it is not reducing the number of pathogens. Okay? The other one is temperature. So for the heat sanitizing, the water has to be hot. Okay? But for chemical sanitizing, the effectiveness also depends on the temperature. Okay? So if it's too hot, it doesn't work so well. Or if it's too cold, it doesn't work well either. So every sanitizing solution would have a direction or instruction on it. So make sure to check those. And contact time. So for the sanitizer or the sanitizing solution to work, it has to stay on the surface for a certain amount of time. Okay, so most of the times it could be 30 seconds up to a minute to 2 minutes. So once again, you need to check with the direction of whatever it says on the container. And water hardness and pH. For the most part, we're going to be using just regular water, so it's okay. But some location may have different water hardness, which means that different minerals that might be present in the regular water. That could also affect how well your sanitizer might work. So for that one, you may have to check with your city to make sure that it's okay. All right, so for time and temperature control, okay? So controlling the time and temperature is very important, okay, to make sure that the food is safe. Now you can control, the time and temperature in a few different areas. So while you're receiving and storing your ingredients, right? So for you guys in the bistro, once again, you may not have to worry about that too much because we have a receiving and storeroom personnel that actually do it for you. But in the industry, as a manager, you have to know and understand what you have to do and what you need to tell your employees to do. Okay, so when you're receiving and storing the items, you want to make sure that you keep the temperature outside of the danger zone. Okay, and obviously during cooking and preparation and also cooling, you want to make sure that these rules are followed. Okay, and holding. I believe I mentioned in the previous video that if you have certain items that you need to keep cold or keep warm, okay, you want to keep it away from the temperature danger zone. Okay. So if you have cold TCS food items, you want to keep it at 5 degrees or lower. Okay, so once again, like a salad items, salad dressings. Okay. But if you have hot items such as soups, okay, or if you have a buffet line with some hot items, needs to be kept 57 degrees Celsius or higher. Okay. And during a food preparation, you want to make sure that you have control over how long your food stays outside of the safe temperature, okay? Or in another word, the time it spends in the danger zone. Okay? So only remove as much food as needed for the task. So for example, if you have 20 kilos of steak that you need to cut. Okay, just go ahead and get 5 kilos out at a time instead of taking all 20. Okay. And once finished, you put it right back into the cooler as soon as possible. Okay. And then keep meat products on ice during prep. That actually is one good way to make sure that everything is cold. Especially in the kitchen, it gets quite hot. During summer, it's even worse. So you put a ice tray and then put meat products on top. If you are trying to thaw frozen items, okay, you can actually do a few different ways to thaw frozen items. So one, the best way is inside the cooler. So if you have something frozen, you need to plan ahead. Take it out, put it in a cooler, and then let it thaw out slowly. Now, for some items, a little smaller items, you may be able to thaw out in cool running water. However, for that one, you want to make sure that you use it right away. Okay? Now, another one says microwave. Okay, microwave is okay to thaw food items, once again, only if you are planning to use that item right away. Okay? And you also need to be careful on using microwave because sometimes it will actually cook the food items. Okay? And also you can thaw frozen items in the process of cooking. Very often you may have frozen peas or frozen vegetables that you can actually put it into a pan directly and then cook right away and serve right away. Okay? And another way is actually it's quicker than in cooler by itself, is that you put the big piece of frozen item, okay, into water and put that container in the cooler. Okay, and that actually works quite well. And for using egg products, consider using pasteurized shelled eggs. Okay? Pasteurized means that it's been heated up to a certain temperature so that it reduces the level of pathogens. Okay? Especially for making things like mayonnaise, for example, that contain eggs and it is not being cooked. So if you are going to use the egg for raw production or you don't cook as long or as much, then you should consider using pasteurized eggs. Okay, so during cooking, so once you pass receiving storage, you do the preparation and you start cooking, okay, you want to make sure that certain food items reach certain temperatures for a specific amount of time. So as I mentioned before, that the bacteria will have certain temperature ranges that they prefer. Okay, so if you want to make sure to eliminate these pathogens, you need to heat it up to a certain temperature and keep it there for a certain amount of time. Okay? And when you are using a thermometer, you want to check it in the thickest part of the food and take at least 2 different readings in 2 different locations so that you are not getting a misread. Okay? And these are the temperatures for different food items. Okay? So for poultry, chicken, turkey, or including ground poultry, you want to heat it up to about 74 degrees Celsius for at least 15 seconds. Okay? And also, if you have stuffed meats or reheating anything, or if you're going to microwave the food to cook. And then below that, 71 degrees Celsius, those would be ground meats or eggs, so it can be hamburger or ground pork. Okay? And then 63 degrees Celsius would be whole cuts of meats, so that would be like a steak, okay, or roast beef or lamb. And any seafood would be 63 degrees. And then 57 degrees Celsius would be vegetables and fruits, grains and legumes, which is beans. Okay? Now, so these temperature and also the arrangement of the refrigerator is related. So from the chicken, ground meats, whole cuts to the seafood, so those are actually the order of what you need to store from bottom up. Okay? So the more dangerous stuff needs to go to the bottom, and then safer items needs to go to the top. Okay? Now, having said that, there are some challenges. Okay, in terms of the time and temperature control. So in restaurants, there are many cases where customer actually requests for undercooked food. Oh, can I have medium rare hamburger, for example? Okay. That medium rare will not go to that temperature of 71 degrees. Okay. And also, when we are talking about food quality, right? So as a chef, I never want to cook steak too well done. But if I want to be safe, then I need to cook it almost medium well. Okay? So we want to have the right balance between the quality and the safety. Okay? And also time constraints and training of staff. So sometimes your staff's not trained well enough, or if they get busy and they don't check the temperature. Okay? So those would be the biggest challenges that you will face in the F&B industry in terms of trying to control the time and temperature. Okay. Another thing that you will have to do in the restaurant is to cool food items. So it's not just cooking. You have to very often cook certain things and you have to cool it down so that you can use later. So for cooling, obviously the food will go into the temperature danger zone. So you want to have a minimum time that the food will spend in that danger zone. And in order for you to do that, you have this two-step cooling method. So in the first 2 hours or so, you should get the food down to from hot down to 21 degrees. Okay, so maximum is 2 hours. You want to spend the first 2 hours at least getting it down to 21 degrees, and then you can spend the next 4 hours, okay, down to outside of the temperature danger zone, which is below 5 degrees. Okay, so if you cool the food to 21 degrees in 1 hour, okay, then you have 5 hours to get the food down to 5 degrees. Okay, but the total cannot go over 6 hours. Okay, and to cool food items, there are a few different ways that you can do. Okay, so place food in ice water bath. Start with an ice battle. So this is an ice battle. Oops. Okay. So that's an ice battle. So what you do is you put water inside and you put it into a freezer. And once it freezes, you can use that to stir. It's usually used for soups or stocks. Okay, and it can actually cool from inside. Now, another way is to cut large items into smaller pieces and divide large containers into smaller pieces, because as smaller it gets, it's actually easier to lose the heat. Okay, and when you are storing the food for more cooling, you can loosely cover the food container. You don't need to completely cover, because by covering it very tightly, it's going to also trap the heat. Okay? But you want to make sure that nothing will drip on top, and you want to make sure that you'll store on top of the shelf. Okay, so that was it for the safety sanitation workshop. I think most of those should have been a review for you guys. So just remember to stay safe and clean, and make sure to keep organized your kitchen, and you should be able to keep everybody safe. Okay, so once again, thank you very much, and see you guys soon. Bye bye.